Hi, and welcome to a Sunny Book Nook. My name is Sunny. For today's video, I've done myself up to be rich girl aesthetic, girl boss vibes, if you're picking up on that. My nails are fucked up, so sorry about that. But I think everything else I'm doing okay at. Today, I wanted to talk to you about some of the books I have been absolutely devouring that all center thematically on the acquisition of wealth or moving up in the world, the attempt at financial independence or well-being or livelihoods, as well as doing a more multimedia rambly video. So this will be a bit different from my other videos on this channel, but I hope you don't mind that. I was watching a YouTube video from For Harriet, hosted by Kimberly Nicole Foster, and she is one of my favorite YouTubers ever. I've been watching her for years. I love her cultural commentary videos, and we've talked about her on my podcast quite a bit. We also mentioned her in our Substack newsletter for the podcast. That's always linked in the description if you want to check that out. But anyways, I was watching her most recent video at this point on For Harriet, which was about influencers and making money. And I was thinking about that in terms of some things I've been reading lately. So in our podcast episode where we review and rank Renaissance, the new Beyonce album, at the end during our media recommendation section, I talk about the book Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino, which I also mentioned in my July wrap up. But there's a really great essay in here that is about scamming and how millennials and young people have grown up in a generation of scammers who have made a lot of money and success but have also been exposed for the scams that they've been making. And I think that is sort of very relevant to the books I want to discuss here, because I've just been absolutely tearing through this genre of this category, this type of story, I would say. I also have been thinking about this in the context of some movies I've been watching lately, particularly the movie Emily the Criminal starring Aubrey Plaza. It's like an independent film. I saw it in theaters the other week and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I'm going to be spoiling a lot of the media that I'm talking about in today's video, so if you haven't read or watched this shit, I'm sorry. I'm going to be talking about it in detail to pull out some of the points I want to make. I was thinking about this movie because the premise is that there is this young woman who's working in the gig economy. She's essentially like a DoorDasher type person, and she works really hard, really long hours, doing really intensive physical labor and just maneuvering around shifts, working for this restaurant, bringing people deliveries. And we see her in this suffocating, anxiety-inducing, and humiliating context of walking up 12 flights of stairs holding a bunch of platters of food to go to a corporate workplace and put them on the table. Our main character, Emily, played by Aubrey Plaza, is not doing well, financially and just mentally, interpersonally. She only has one friend whom we see, and she is working at this magazine, this design place, this firm that is also Emily's essentially dream job as well, because they both went to high school together in New Jersey and they went to art school together. But Emily has to pay off a lot of student loans, and it's really stuck her in a position in which she had to drop out because a relative got sick and she had to take care of her. And so now she is very much struggling. Essentially, she gets involved into this scheme where she makes a lot of money being a dummy shopper, which is not entirely legal because she's using stolen credit cards to buy items that cost a lot of money and then essentially reselling them. And we see in this very heart-wrenching scene that made me so furious and also made Emily furious, in which she is having a conversation with the boss of the company that her friend works for, that she's attempting at getting a job at so that she can make a salaried position and do what she wants to do, which is art and design. But their conversation is absolutely fucking infuriating. This is how it goes. Essentially, she goes in for an interview and is offered the position of an unpaid internship that is just working full time. And she's dude, I have fucking bills to pay. I live in a shared apartment. I'm barely making ends meet as is. I need to pay my student loans. This is not gonna fucking work. And the boss, the girl boss, CEO, is like, you're so ungrateful. I had to work so hard to get here because the first design firm I tried to work at was all men. I was the only woman, and I had to be the secretary. And she was like, and Emily was like, well, you got paid as a secretary, right? Like, so this sort of gets at the point that I want to talk about. This relationship between like the employer and the employee, or the scammer and the industry, and how they are able to navigate the world of like capitalism and skirting around the law and trying to build wealth, have an income, survive, live, be happy, you know, have the things that financially secure people are able to have, while also addressing like the gendered nature of this type of work and the way that race and gender and all of these things heavily play into how someone is or isn't able to climb the ranks of the financial ladder, as well as how they're able to get there. I think the most poignant scene of this very anxiety-inducing, thrilling film, because we see her get into all of these situations that are very violent and having these interactions that are just like very scary, and then we see her escape the scene of the crime and flee to Latin America, which is where she's always wanted to be anyways. The final shots of the film is her like in the ocean, you know, the beautiful shots of wherever she is. I don't think the country is specified. But then the last scene of the film is her sitting down in a room with other people and doing the same training that she experienced on her first day of being a dummy shopper. She is giving them the instructions of how to do it. And so essentially she takes the scheme that she got involved in at an entry level and becomes the person who runs that scheme in this other country. And that is the end of the movie. It reminds me of how like in the movie Parasite, at the very end of the film, there is this beautiful fantasy world in which our main characters are able to reunite and the family can be together because the son has climbed the ranks of wealth and can buy back this house that his father is trapped in. But it's just a fantasy, right? And the reality is that the poor oftentimes stay poor, and the means by which they attempt to accumulate wealth are illegal, and then when they get caught, it's fucking over, right? And that has just been something I have been thinking about a lot because of the books I've been reading. So the first book I want to talk about is probably the least, it's like the most innocuous of the bunch because it's not really about scamming. It's more about just working in a industry and being the female personal assistant to male-dominated workplaces. It is called Smile and Look Pretty by Alexandra Pellegrino. This book follows 4 different young women who live in New York City and all work as personal assistants to people who have the jobs of their dreams. One of them works for this huge publishing house as the personal assistant to someone in it. One of them works as a personal assistant to this B-list, C-list actor who's still incredibly wealthy. And one of them works as an assistant within a broadcast journalism space that has like a Good Morning Show type of thing. And then another one of them works as the personal assistant to a TV show writer because she wants to write for TV shows, like a dark comedy type vibe, right? And so we see all of them as they essentially reach their breaking point and decide to start a website, a blog called 20 Somethings, in which women can anonymously share their stories of being exploited, mistreated, and sexually harassed at their workplaces and the terrible working conditions that they just have to live under if they want to, supposedly if they want to succeed in the industry and have the roles and have the jobs and have their dream careers that they want. Essentially, things spiral out of control pretty quickly. And I found this book very, very engaging. I rated it 4.5 stars. I thought that it tackled the issues of like sexual misconduct in the workplace in a very cogent way. And I think that it was very fast-paced and fun. but also dark, to see the different perspectives of all of these different women and how they're all such close friends. But it also reveals the inherent, like, fucked up natures of all of these industries, and how all the people who have the power within these industries are rich and powerful men who are able to do whatever they want and mistreat all of their underlings, essentially. And so this book really goes in on that and, like, eviscerates the habits and lifestyles and worker relations of these rich and powerful men. And I think that the way that this book examined how most of these young women are just living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay rent, struggling to live while pursuing the career of their dreams, where while the men left and right of them are given opportunities that they are not, was disheartening and, like, you know, the sad reality of the world that we live in, of course. And it was a criticism of that primarily, but I think it did lean into that girl boss, like, I work so hard and I get nothing from it, like, this isn't fair, this is just not fair, I deserve more sort of line of thinking and rhetoric that doesn't necessarily tackle, like, the nature of the industry at large. It's more of just talking about, you know, the emergence of, like, the hashtag Time's Up, hashtag Me Too movement that has taken over Hollywood and the bigwig execs at broadcast journalism companies and stuff over the past few years that we've seen in our real life, right? So this book is like a fictionalized narrative, an examination of that. And I think that it did a lot of good things, a lot of great things in the plot of the book and with these characters that I enjoyed. But I'm not completely sure about, like, the politics of it, because it's so focused on, I think, like, visibility, which is necessary for the plot of the book, because their website, 20-something, that ends up taking off and going viral, the visibility of it and the contributions from all of these different people is really necessary for their goal of, like, revolutionizing these industries and making them better for women and workers. It falls flat in some ways, I guess. I was watching this Kimberly Nicole Foster video on her channel For Harriet, I believe, and she talks about the reality of being, like, an influencer and making money in that way and how that works, specifically for Black people on the internet. And I was thinking about that in context to this video that I wanted to film, and she was talking about how, like, the representation element of the politics of, like, making money and being seen as someone who is powerful and rich is really, really important, and that's why influencers lie so much, which is the title of the video. So I was thinking about that and how these women at the very end of the book go on, like, Good Morning America, the show that one of them is, like, an intern or personal assistant at, and share their stories, reveal their identities, because before that entirely it was anonymous. All the submissions were anonymous, all of the people who ran it were anonymous. A big thing that was going on was towards the last third of the book was, like, who runs this site? Everyone wants to know, right? But the book essentially just ends at that point, where after these four women have gone up and spoken their truths, we don't really see anything past that, right? So it's like, what is revolutionizing this industry besides just sharing these women's stories and then becoming hyper visible about the realities of this workplace? Like, we do see some changes or some adjustments that are in each of these women's workplaces and in their employee-employer relationships, and, like, some of them quit their jobs and stuff. Within the scope and limitation of this, like, fictional book, we don't even really see how their industry at large, like, changes, and it's still a rat race. Also, the fucking cicadas outside my door right now, bro. Anyway, reaching for scraps from people who are incredibly powerful and rich, right? So the next book I want to talk about, after I read this, I immediately picked up Fake by Erica Katz. And this book also follows a New York City 20-something woman who is an artist who graduated from Yale with an art degree and is working at a, like, forgery company, but it's just, like, it's above water. It is called, like, Gemini Arts or something, and essentially she has to make copies, exact replicas of these masterworks of art from history, like impressionist paintings and shit like that, so that when museums like the Met or whatever want to switch out the paintings for cleaning, that they can have something in its place that looks exactly like the original piece without the museum goers having to not be able to experience the sight of seeing these pieces. It's a legitimate job, and it's something that is legal, above board, and right. But of course, our main character is making pennies. Her name is Emma Kahn, and I think it's really funny that her last name is Kahn because con artist. Anyway, so our main character ends up getting embroiled in a less than legal scheme that she doesn't even know really she's getting embroiled in until it's like too late. But we see all the red flags as they pop up, because the client that she has been working for at Gemini offers her like a job and these opportunities and positions that are like maybe too good to be true. She ends up working at her like a dream gallery as the assistant director of like the gallery. She ends up meeting all of these rich and famous people, including this influencer that she's obsessed with. The influencer in question is named Jules, at Just Jules on Instagram, and she has like a bunch of followers, and she just talks about like art and going to galleries and all of this shit, like art auctions, whatever. But we see Emma get further and further embroiled and twisted up in the world of like art forgery, like genuine forgery, without thinking that she's doing anything wrong. Also, the relationship with this rich Russian man who takes her under his wing and gives her all of these positions and access to resources and spaces that she previously just had no proximity to whatsoever. So the fact that this benevolent billionaire character is like her mentor or supporter or patron is questionable for Emma and for us as the reader, right? It's like, what does he get out of this? And we find out as the book progresses. But I think that the way that this book totally cracks open like the art world and looks at the relationship between wealth hoarding and like exchanging money and making money via these invaluable works of art through the perspective of a young woman who is very much an artist and loves art and loves works of art and the art world, but finds herself in very precarious situations. The book sort of alternates perspectives in which we see her progression throughout being a painter getting paid not much at Gemini up till being at this, working at this gallery, and then also being a freelancer for the Russian guy who takes her under his wing and making copies of paintings for him. We see the progression of this through her recounting to these FBI agents who are at her door being like, so tell us everything you know about this, like what happened, how did you get involved? And I think like this framing device was interesting and probably necessary for the nature of the story, and also makes me think about the next book I want to talk about. But I think that Fake by Erica Katz talks a lot about trauma as well, and how the trauma of our main character and her father's death and everything involved around that was what drove her away from her hometown in the first place and to New York City, and for like why her artwork isn't getting the praise that she thinks it deserves. She's like looking at all these other contemporary artists and being like, your work is fucking mid. My shit is better. Why is my shit not up, right? And I thought that was so interesting. Like we see the bullshit veneer of like the art world and through her interactions with, especially at Just Jules, which takes me back to the influencer conversation and video I was talking about from Kimberly, because as an influencer, Just Jules like tries to wheedle her way into friendship with Emma, and it's entirely coincidental at first. We see as Emma's like Instagram presence, which previously was just like a private account with 22 followers and 0 posts, goes up into like tens of thousands of people following her, and she talks about in the book like, oh, I posted this on my story and I made this post and we took this selfie and whatever. But like we see how artificial Jules is, and how the art world is just as artificial as fake, right? So like Emma is literally painting these fakes, and eventually the fakes that she's making for this client, the Russian billionaire who took her under his wing, shit goes south real quick, especially by the end of the novel. But I thought that this book was so interesting and so like fast paced. I was on the edge of my seat, etc. I just loved the way that it totally eviscerated the fakeness of the art world, and also the way that all the rich people that she runs into, all the incredibly powerful billionaires and whomever, even if they all do have their own like humanity, and how wealth has changed their relationship to like themselves internally, how their lives are so lavish and luxurious and over the top and extravagant in like this egregious, almost sickening way. And so we kind of get that glimpse into what it's like to be filthy rich from the perspective of a woman who has lived most of her adult life working very hard, working from dawn to dusk, making paintings that are copies of old artwork to be sold and bought by incredibly wealthy people. And it was just, I don't know, I really, really liked it. But I think that parallel line of her getting investigated by the FBI and that being the chapter breaks leads me to the next book that I read. I think like all three of these books follow a continual line, but they're all very girl boss coded, I would say. And the last book I want to talk about is one that I finished today called Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen. This book is also framed through an FBI investigation. Essentially, our main character opens it up with like, Miss Detective, this is what happened and how I got embroiled in the counterfeit bag scheme. So we get introduced to this 37-year-old woman, Ava, who is Chinese American, and her mother, who was a Chinese immigrant, recently passed, and she has a 2-year-old son, and her husband is a surgeon who works a bunch of long hours. And so Ava, who was previously like a corporate tax lawyer, has now become a stay-at-home mom and is not really satisfied with her life. Then when her old college roommate, who dropped out after like a quarter because of a fake SAT scores Chinese student scandal, Winnie, the foreign Chinese student who was her roommate for a quarter, reintroduces herself into her life, rebranded as this glamorous expat Chinese woman, and Winnie gets Ava involved in her scheme of buying and selling counterfeit bags for a profit. And it is similar to the Emily the Criminal thing of like being a dummy shopper, because there are in China a bunch of counterfeit designer bag companies and creations. It's like it has its own culture unto itself. And there are some bags that are like super fakes. Like they are the bags that are so good that they could pass most inspections as like a legitimate bag from the designer company are called super fakes. And essentially what happens is that there's a connection to a manufacturer in China that Winnie has that makes super fakes, and they take the super fakes, bring them to department stores or, storefronts from the designer, return them, and get money back. And so it's a profit-making scheme, and there's also like a reselling site involvement thing as well. And it just becomes incredibly convoluted, very illegal, and spins wildly out of control very fast. But I think that counterfeit is similar to fake because of the nature of the FBI interview framework, and it's similar to Emily the Criminal because it's about these women who are doing illegal things to make money and to try to be able to do what they want to do with their lives. And I think that like the gendered and sexual harassment commentary that Smile Look Pretty talks about is also very much part of Counterfeit because of the people that she has to interact with. But it's also like racialized because as a Chinese American woman, and then her friend being a Chinese woman who happens to be in America, these two people who are involved in this scheme together are also very much affected by like the gendered culture of purchasing designer bags. And Ava is a mother and in an unhappy somewhat relationship with her husband, and she feels like she is failing at being a mom. And so much of this book, Counterfeit, is also about like Chinese culture and Chinese family and the idea of like saving face and how essential that is to how Ava navigates her life. And as the book progresses, we get some reveals and twists and turns that are just like, whoa, it gave me fucking whiplash. It was amazing. I loved it. I was live, laugh, loving for that shit, you know? And I think that the book, by the end of the story, not to entirely spoil it, like, I think that the point that it's making about the American nature of scamming and getting a profit and the ideas of China from an American standpoint are what drives the nature of these women's schemes. And it was fascinating to read about. And I think like the reason why I wanted to contextualize all of these things together, all of these pieces of media following young women trying to get control of their lives, trying to change things for the better, trying to, you know, make money, hustle, is that I think so many of these pieces of media, as well as the essay in Trick Mirror and a lot of the essays in this book about like the digital age and the construction of the woman identity, of womanhood in our contemporary age, was all, I don't know, I feel like they're all tied together thematically through this constant need and desire to acquire wealth and status through the perspectives of women who are not necessarily like cutthroat bitches or, you know, like girl bosses, but who end up in the position of being that type of person one way or the other. And I enjoyed all of these pieces of media, and I hope that my discussion of trying to bring them together was interesting for you, because I enjoyed my sit-down ramble. I didn't even have any notes to look off of, which is what I usually do when I try to make a more discussion-based or review-based video, but, you know, I hope that you enjoyed this nonetheless. Let me know if you have any thoughts about any of the topics that I discussed here, and if you've watched this movie, or if you're subscribed to the For Harriet or Kimberly Nicole Foster channel, or if you've read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments below. And if you haven't, let me know if any of this discussion like interests you whatsoever, despite me spoiling like the movie perhaps. Oh, and let me know if you want me to make more videos that bring together these more general thematic concepts that I've been seeing and consuming in my media habits a lot more frequently. You know, if you want me to make more videos about that shit, I definitely will. I also talk about all of these books in our most recent The Lavender Menace Substack newsletter. So for between episodes of my podcast dropping, we are going to be doing like a roundup, and it'll be in 3 parts. So the first part is us scripting a text conversation between me and my podcast co-host about something that's going on the internet. The second one is talking about the media we've been consuming lately, and for my section I wrote about the books that I've been reading and the scamming nature of all of this shit, and I was talking about maybe writing an essay about it, but I ended up, you know, doing this video instead, unless I could extrapolate more in an essay if you really wanted. And then the third part was us talking about different creators on the internet, including For Harriet and Kimberly Nicole Foster, who I also referenced in this video. So I guess like that newsletter has also, and writing that has also informed this video as well, but I just wanted to extrapolate more on the concepts that have been living in my mind recently, and the intersections of like money making and race and gender and ascending through the class strata in how it's portrayed in media, you know? So I hope this was interesting to you. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Let me know if you want any more of these videos. Bye!